This is the DRF Sports Forum Podcast. Here's your host, Peter Thomas Fornatel.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Sports Forum Podcast. This is show number 2. I'm not used to saying numbers solo. I'm used to the DRF Players Podcast where I'm saying numbers in the 300. But this is just show number 2. I am joined once again by the managing editor of DRF Sports Forum, Scott Gramling. Scott, how are you tonight?
I'm doing very well. It's great to be here again.
Excellent. A little bit of a truncated show this week. We're diving right into our round table, joining Scott and myself for the next half an hour or so will be Mr. Friday Night Lights himself, Jonathon Kinchen. JK, what's up?
PTF, what's going on? I never got to hear how you signed off the last show. I mean, obviously, I didn't listen to it back. I was on it. That would be kind of weird. So you got to tell me how you ended it.
Well, you'll hear at the end of this one because I'm going to keep you with us the whole time. There will be other shows where we'll do like we did in the first one with an interview segment and me doing a little rant about something. But this week I'm still in London, and we're gonna just do the round table for the course of the next 30 minutes or so, and we're gonna let that be this week's show, and we'll get back to that longer form version. But the plus side of that, JK, is you'll actually get to hear the sign off live. So, all right, here I am. I'm staying in Vauxhall. I've been saying Vauxhall, but lately I've been hearing people say it like sort of more run together, Vauxhall. So I'm going with that. And while there is obviously plenty of interest in the NFL over here, a series of games which will be starting shortly, with everything going on in my life, I watched less football last weekend in the NFL than any weekend, I would say, in memory. So my first question for each of you in the roundtable segment, and we'll start with you, Scott. What did I miss? What did we learn last week in the NFL that might be actionable for us going forward?
Wow, that's let's see, how am I going to sum that up? All right, I would say a couple of things, and Jay, I'd love to hear what you have to say too, because I know that Battle of Texas on Sunday night was near and dear to your heart, so I'll avoid talking about that one. I think we learned that the New Orleans Saints are kind of back to where they need to be, and that seems to happen every year where they start off a bit slow and they it on. And I would say the same thing about the New England Patriots, although I had far less concern about them because they were facing formidable opponents on the road that were giving them difficulties, as opposed to the Saints giving up 48 points to Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think we've had confirmed that the Packers have issues outside of the quarterback position. I'd be willing to go so far as to say from player number 2 to player number 53, I think the Packers are a bottom 10 team, potentially bottom 5, but it's that number 1 player that masks a lot of the issues. And I guess the final thing I would put out there is that the Cleveland Browns are likely to be competitive week in and week out after that sound game they played against the Ravens. And I know we spoke last week about a betting system that did apply to the Browns and did come through, but I think that when you look at a team like the Browns that is going to lose a game 45-42 one week to the Raiders and then win 12-9 against the Ravens, on the one hand, you like to say it's a bit schizophrenic, but I think when it's a team coming off a 0-win season, it goes to show that they have the ability to compete on each side of the ball. If they start putting it all together, the team continue to really offer some value despite the fact that they're already 4-1 against the spread.
I was going to mention that 4-1 ATS now for the Cleveland Browns. I wonder how many bettors are feeling confident when they go to the window and bet on that particular side, though, based on recent history. JK, I know you had some thoughts about the Browns, but I want to start off by getting your general take on that question. Anything in particular you feel like you learned watching the NFL last weekend?
The Patriots are back on offense. You can bet on the Browns with a little bit of confidence. The Chiefs and the Jaguars are both pretty darn good. The Rams are legit, and both teams from Texas aren't very good, but Dallas is the worst of the two.
I like that. It's a nice summation. It's a very very succinct. But I want to pause on what you said. You want to go so far as to say you can bet on the Browns with confidence?
Well, I mean, obviously the lines are going to be are going to, they're going to paint a very good picture of their chances each and every Sunday or Thursday and Monday. So the point being is that if you're going to get +6 with the Browns or -4 with the Browns or whatever the situation might be, there's actually you can have a sense of confidence if you are, leading yourself down that direction with Baker Mayfield and like you said there, like Scott had mentioned, the ability for them to be competitive in a shootout, but then also be able to pull out a squeaker in an overtime game with a bunch of field goals. It shows that the team can be competitive, but it's a team that's been a habitual loser, and that you kind of have to learn how to win. And it sounds like, and it seems like they're trying to do that.
All right. Well, the LA Chargers going to Cleveland this week. The line currently Chargers by 1. What's your gut there for JK now, the new biggest Cleveland Brown fan I know?
Those are the types of games. I don't have any interest in that situation. If you're going to take a pick, you got to have a real strong opinion. I think a lot of times people are inclined to just kind of, oh, well, they should win because they're at home. Oh, this should happen. I don't have a strong opinion there. In fact, I haven't even been forced. Yeah, I said forced to watch an entire Chargers game. So I'm not even sure how good they really are. By looking at them with my eye, I know where they kind of stack up from, in the stat standpoint. So I really don't have an opinion there. But if you like the Browns, I think the way that they played the last couple of weeks, you should have a little confidence going into that.
All right, we've got this big marquee matchup this week pitting the Kansas City Chiefs against Scott's New England Patriots. Chiefs coming in 5-0 in real life, 5-0 against the spread, but the Patriots appear to be coming into form, and you almost have to wonder if a little bit of the slow start, I don't want to say it's by design, but the idea that this is a team that's planning on its season going through the end of week 17 and beyond, if they're not just hitting their stride now in a way that's going to make bettors have to pay extra attention to them. Put your fan hat on the side, Scott. I just want your read as an analyst on this game. Currently, Patriots by 3.5. Is that the right line? And what do you see happening here? Do you have a strong opinion about it?
I do have a somewhat strong opinion here. I think this is a good spot for the Patriots. I feel like, and J.K. mentioned, when he mentioned the teams he thought were for real, he mentioned both the Chiefs and the Jaguars. And it might come as a surprise to some people because the Jaguars lost by 16 points against the Chiefs. I came away with the same feeling as J.K., that the Jaguars were for real, because they racked up more than 500 yards of offense, and they did not let the Chiefs throw all over them. And I think that what I took out of that game is that the Chiefs are beatable. And when you have a Patriots squad that's coming off the Thursday night game with the extra time to prepare, I think that's a big advantage in this one. And I think it's enough of an advantage that it does lead me to believe, coming off, Pat Mahomes had his roughest start of the year. We kind of thought that would be the case going up against that Jaguar secondary. Patriots secondary obviously isn't as good, but I think the fact that Jacksonville put up 500 yards of total offense, more than 500 yards of offense. And the reason they only scored 14 points because Blake Bortles was throwing the ball all over the place and turning the ball over. Tom Brady will not turn the ball over, especially at home. He certainly won't do it to that extent. I think because of that, the Patriots will have similar success moving the ball like Jacksonville did against this Kansas City defense, but they're not going to turn the ball over. I also feel like the Patriots running game is kind of rounding into form now. Sony Michel, first-round pick, missed all of the preseason and week 1. So he's really entering, just the back half of the first quarter of his season, if you throw the preseason in as well. And each game he's made improvements. He's certainly a talented runner, and I think it sometimes does take a little time, and JK probably has better insight than me on this. It takes a little time for a running back, especially a college running back, to kind of gel with an offensive line, and that seems to be happening as well. So I think for those reasons, I do like the Patriots, and I am putting my fan hat to the side, but I do like the Patriots an awful lot in this one. And I think there's value because of the fact that Kansas City is on such a win streak. You look at NFL road teams have gone 7-29-2 against the spread when they haven't been favored, and they're coming off 3 consecutive wins against the spread over the first half of the season. That number is 3-14 against the spread for such underdogs since the start of 2014. So I think that the Chiefs are certainly a formidable opponent, but I think this matchup really does favor the Patriots laying the 3.5 points.
I like that stat. That's the kind of actionable information you're going to find week in, week out in DRF sports form, as well as the Platinum Sheet and Best Bet supplement, all of which are available under the Daily Racing Form auspices these days. JK, couple of good follow-ups for you there. I want to get your take on that idea of a line and a running back gelling as the season goes on. And I also want to say it's utterly logical that with a coach such as Belichick, having the extra time would be a benefit. But I was just curious to ask you specifically, in your opinion, at this point in the season, how much of an edge is it if you give a top-level coach a few extra days to scout the next opponent?
There's a few guys you don't want to give extra time. Aaron Rodgers is one of those guys. Drew Brees, Tom Brady, and here's the reason why. It's not so much that there's just more time to figure out what they want to do against you. It's more time to perfect what they were going to do anyways. It's an extra walkthrough day, an extra mental day, an extra day for rest for the body, an extra day to the coaches don't have to get off the plane on Sunday night and then stay up till 4 o'clock breaking down the film from the previous game in order to get ready to go back to work on Monday. They've got that extra day where they can just take their time and be a little bit more methodical through the process. So it's a huge edge for me, and it's a off of bye weeks and off extra days of rest. Is definitely something I take into consideration. Back to our racing comparison when it comes to this sports situation, is that we talk about good stat and bad stat all the time with DRF Formulator, where there's stats that can be misleading. I talked last week about how much I love the third down stat, and if you look at the stats around and you'll see Kansas City is second on defense on their third down percentage. They're allowing 29%, which is really good. But if you dig a little bit deeper, you'll notice that part of the reason that I think that's happening is because they're also outscoring. They're leading the league in points per the first half. So essentially every team they're playing against is coming from behind. They're abandoning the run. So now they're in less manageable third down situations. And sometimes that can, they're 3rd and 8 and they're throwing the ball. 3rd and 11, they're throwing the ball. 3rd and 7, they're throwing the ball. And that can create a little bit of a misleading stat. I think the Patriots are going to get after them at home. If anyone asked me, I do kind of love the Patriots, but this is one of those games, just like in racing, that I would recommend passing because you just don't know what's quite going to happen. Patrick Mahomes is obviously playing amazing. The Patriots have shown some rockiness, but now they're back. I think that they're going to win. I think they'll play good. If I had to wager on it, I would pick the Patriots side minus the 3.5. But for me, this is a game I'm going to pass. It makes me a little bit too nervous.
Interesting. All right, Scott, I know we got to kick you in just a couple minutes. I wanted to hit you up with a couple of other questions before we let you go, including getting one of your picks that you're willing to release on this show for all of Scott's best bets, which have been performing quite well so far this season. You can check out the best bets supplement off the what's actually the easiest way, Scott, for people to find that material?
If you go to foxsheets.com, that really is kind of the hub for everything. That will have links at the nav bar that takes you to our platinum sheet, to our best bets. It's where you find all the good stuff.
Excellent, excellent. Before we get to that pick, I did want to ask, and this one I'll get your take on it quickly too, JK. Are we at a point? It seemed like we had maybe a week off of the sort of full-on roughing the QB narratives taking over. Are we at a point where the way this rule is being enforced is affecting the bets that you make at all, Scott?
No. And what I think has happened here is I'm taking the contrarian side. I think the rule has been effectively enforced, and I think we're already seeing where defensive players are adjusting. You're still going to have these, incredulous look on defensive players' faces, and the big one was Michael Bennett in Philadelphia. Kind of hit Kirk Cousins around the thigh, sort of slid down. They said he hit him low. All benefit of the doubt is going to go to the quarterback. And these guys are already starting to learn. And I think that, they're just, they're being less careless. And I do choose those words carefully instead of saying more careful. I think they're being less careless when they're getting after the quarterback. And it's like everything. It's going to be an adjustment. And I think so many of those calls were made early in the season that it had the effect that the NFL wanted to have. Whether you like the rule or not, it's had the effect of defensive players adjusting the way they get after the quarterback. So it's really not affecting how I'm handicapping games.
JK, your quick take on that, and then I want to get it back to Scott for a pick and then let him get about his day, and we'll make sure to have more time with him next week.
No, not at all. It doesn't concern me at all. It's and in fact, I would think that this is, that I would think that the sack number would actually go up in theory, because you're going to get a more controlled, more under control and calculated approach from a defensive player rather than being so reckless and going for that kill shot.
Interesting. That's two sort of contrarian takes on it, both of which I like. Scott, one play that we should be looking to piggyback on this weekend.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the well to a certain degree here with I know we spoke last week about it's really one of my favorite betting systems, and it came through for the Browns, and it was essentially saying that teams that are dominating their opponents, and the math that's involved in that is teams with a point differential of at least plus 10. And that's what the Ravens were last week. When teams with a plus 10 point differential are coming into a game after back-to-back games where they gave up 14 or fewer points, they just tend to be overvalued. And that's what the Ravens were last week. We were favored by 3. They ended up losing by 3. The team I like this week that applies to that same system is I like the Dolphins going against the Bears. I think the Bears are overvalued here, and that same system applies where teams with a point differential of at least plus 10 have gone 2-15 against the spread since the Baltimore game added to that. 2-15 against the spread since the start of 2014 when coming off back-to-back games in which they allowed 14 or fewer points. I think there's a lot of people out there that are just making the quick assumption that Miami has a banged-up line, Khalil Mack is going to sack Ryan Tannehill 6 or 7 times, and Chicago's going to roll the same way they rolled going against the Buccaneers before their bye week. And speaking of the bye week, I think there's a lot of people that might veer towards Chicago because of them coming off a bye week. Chicago is 0-4 both straight up and against the spread coming off a bye since the start of 2014. They've been outscored by an average margin of more than 19 points per game, and that's despite the fact they have not been a double-digit underdog in any of those contests. So, 2 of those 4 games, the Bears have played on the road like they're going to be playing at Miami. They've been outscored by an average of 33.5 points in those games. So all of those numbers, to me, kind of materialize as I don't think that the Dolphins, they were not as good as what they were getting credit for when they were 3-0. I don't think they're as bad as what they're being blamed for now that they've gone 0-2 in the last 2 games. The last 2 games have been very tall orders on the road against the Patriots, on the road against a very solid Bengals team. I think returning home here, getting points against a Bears team that didn't look great in a win against the Cardinals before they blew out the Buccaneers, and quite frankly didn't look great in beating the Seahawks team that is down at home the week prior to that. I just feel like there's a lot of value here, even to the point where I'm not even convinced that the right team is favored. I like the Dolphins getting 3, and I like the Dolphins on the money line.
To Scott's point about Khalil Mack and the Dolphins line, I agree with what he's saying. And here's the thing: is as a sitting on your couch or in your car or wherever you happen to be, if you're aware of the idea that the Dolphins line is banged up and they're going against Khalil Mack, the Dolphins offensive coordinator and the Dolphins line coach and tight ends coach are aware of that too, right? They're gonna chip them. They're gonna send the back that way. They're gonna put a lot of tight ends over there to get Khalil Mack in a wide technique rather than being in an inside spot. When we talk about it in racing, don't dodge one horse in a graded stakes. The same situation here. One player can make a difference, but not in such a glaring way. Those coaches can scheme up some ideas to try to neutralize him a little bit. It doesn't mean that it's not going to help maybe some other players on that defensive line, but the idea that that corner's out, so and so is going to go off for 1,000,000 yards. Well, yeah, but they're going to roll coverage there. They're aware that guy's going to be out already. There's a lot of different things that can happen.
All right, the game is not that simple, is what JK is saying. I agree with that 100%.
Excellent. Let me let you go, Scott. I know you've got stuff to do. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us. We'll have you for more time next time, and we'll catch you then.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it, guys. Always great talking with you.
Till the next time. And I do think that's actually a pretty interesting angle that you do see in other sports too, where the one player is out, the market can tend to focus on that, and when you're dealing with a team sport and when you're dealing with a sport with the coaches of varying skill sets, there can be ways of sort of papering that over, at least in the short term. It's an interesting angle, and I liked a lot of the stats Scott was dropping on the show, because they point to weaknesses in the way the market comes together. And I think for me, that's when a lot of those type of numbers really start to have more meaning. I'm by nature more of a fundamentalist handicapper, whether you're talking about horses or teams. But when you're looking at situations that are going to skew the betting market, that's when I start to pay attention.
Scott's point about the point differential by 10 points. It reminds me of an opportunity we're going to have coming up here in a few weeks in the Breeders' Cup with this Philly Serengeti Empress who won by like the length of the stretch. It appears that she's stronger than she might actually be when she gets into a dogfight based on that open links victory. The same can happen in football when teams are winning by 10 or more points and holding teams to not very many points. It can kind of paint a picture that might not be so accurate.
I want to talk to you about another point Scott brought up, JK, about the bye weeks, which we're starting to see more and more of. As a bettor, how do the bye weeks affect you generally?
Well, it's tricky because I think the market is aware of it now. I think that there's enough sophistication in the market that they're aware that teams are coming off a bye, and that's definitely an edge. I think the biggest thing about it for me is when you can find a team whose strength is a high level quarterback. I think that you get those real great, like perfect performances out of guys that are coming off of byes. They have a lot of quarterback play is rhythm and a lot of good offense is knowing where the defense is going to line up. And I think the more time that you have to prepare, the more likely that those two things happen. And so I think that you can really find opportunities in those situations. Now to find some good moments of a team that has a real edge. But like I said, I think the market kind of knows that it's happening, and sometimes that can be problematic when trying to find an opportunity.
All right, let's talk about some specific games that you like. We talked briefly last week about these teasers that you've been playing. Remind the audience, JK, how these teaser bets function, and let us know who's in your top teaser this week.
Well, it's a multi-game play. It took me a long time to realize that the math in a parlay is essentially if you were just to keep running the game, the money that you win back, letting it ride every time. It took me forever to I had to get a whiteboard out and someone with a marker to show me the math that was actually the case. JK tries math and fails. But the teaser is different because you get between 6.5, and 7 points in your favor. So if the line is so-and-so -6, you take the 6-point teaser, then you'll have the game at a pick. If it's 10, then you get it at -3, so on and so forth. And it goes the other way too. If a team's +10, you get 7, you got +17. So I like to find games where the numbers are in a good spot that I can kind of make some good things happen. And this weekend, I love a 3-team tease, a 7-point tease. I'm going to use the Los Angeles Rams on the road against the Denver Broncos. Their line is -7. Then I'll have the Rams at just a pick. The Jacksonville Jaguars, we talked about at the beginning how good I thought they were, even though they lost to the Chiefs. I still think they're a quality football team, and I actually think the Cowboys are one of the worst teams in the league. So I'm going to take the Jaguars +4 in that situation, which gets me over that field goal mark, +4. And then I'm going to take the Green Bay Packers on Monday night. The line is -9.5. Tease them down 7 points to -2.5. So I need the Packers by a field goal. The Jags can lose by a field goal, and I need the Rams just to keep the streak alive and win.
How important is it for you, and I assume the answer is very, when you're playing one of these teaser bets, to move through the key numbers of 3 and 7 with the side that you're in favor of?
It's a huge part of it. When you can get that extra half a point to get under the 3, get under the 7, get under the 10, get above the 3, when you can get that +3.5, it's definitely something I want to look at. I also think it's important to avoid, you're giving away a lot of value when you are teasing a team to +2.5, right? Because you're that half a point, that +2.5 is not doing a whole lot for you. So you're essentially kind of wasting the gas on that thing. The same can be said about a +5.5 or a +8.5. 8.5, not so much because at least you're above that touchdown thing. But so yeah, you definitely want to keep an eye on that. And like I said, those -7s with teams that I really like are some of my favorite ones to use in those teases.
Paying attention to which numbers are live and which numbers are kind of dead or meaningless is what you're advising. And for the uninitiated, that 3-team 7-point teaser you're putting forth, what kind of odds will one typically get on that?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I believe the 3-team is 3-team. That's bad. It's somewhere like 3-to-1-ish. I know that I'll look it up. I forget it, and it's different at different places, by the way.
Sure. Take a look. I can vamp for a minute. Very excited to be heading home on Friday. I'll miss London, of course, but it's been a blast being here this week. And when you say football, they're talking about a completely other game, though one that's equally more fun when you get the opportunity to bet on it. But it will be fun, even though I'll miss my beloved Giants playing on Thursday night this week. Hey, maybe that's a good thing, the way that they've looked, and have an opportunity, though, to settle back into the war room in the Brooklyn bunker and enjoy some NFL football action on Sunday. And we'll be back with a more regular schedule of podcasts, both the DRF Players podcast for racing and the DRF Sports Forum podcast for all this fun stuff next week. Looking forward to that as well. All right, were you able to dig and find that piece of information, JK?
Yeah, it's usually somewhere between. It's like around plus 150. I've seen it some places. I think it varies from place to place, but it's a little bit better than even money.
Gotcha. Okay, so 3-1. I was getting excited for a second there.
Yeah,
more like
the more
like
teams,
3 to 2.
Yeah, the more teams you use, the better it gets. But and I think that if you do 2 teams, it's about minus 120. So you can kind of look at what normal people are paying for a regular game. If you can find 2 teams and run them together, that's 7 points, man. It really comes in handy.
Well, again, if you can if you can move those numbers around to a point where they're meaningful, it starts to make sense. I take your point why that could become worth more than the simple parlay on the money line, which in some instances would be successful a similar amount of the time theoretically. In other times, if you're moving the numbers around to where you're meaningfully improving your chances, all of a sudden it starts to make sense, even if the odds aren't maybe all you dream that they'd be. You can still put them into a favorable situation. It's not a bet that I think. It's interesting because it's not a bet that I think a lot of old school players necessarily would advocate. I mean, when you talk to other folks JK, who know gambling very well, what's the typical reaction when you're teasing all these games?
It's not that common, I guess when I was in college and we started, betting $5 bets when we're all sitting around, I was clicking on everything, trying to learn as much as I could, and teaser always caught my attention. I felt like I had a pretty good opinion when it came to football, but there's those unlucky moments, those last second field goals, those all of those situations, injuries and all kinds of stuff. And I felt like if I could have a free touchdown in my favor, I guess it's not really free, but having a touchdown in my favor would help my strike rate. And allow me to avoid the loss column a little bit more often. This game is effectively a coin flip, and at least it's designed to be that way. And so I try to do something to find a little bit of an edge.
What I like about it also, and this is my last thought on it, is just we know that these spreads are so efficient, the money lines are so efficient. But when you can introduce this other element and sort of take this number that's designed to be efficient one way and sort of look at it through this other lens, it is logical to me that there could occasionally be some opportunities. So we'll look for that teaser of yours, Rams, Jags, Packers in a 7-point teaser. We'll come back next week and check how you do. You had a strong first week on this show. Let's see how the second week goes. And that's it. That's all the time we have. I want to thank Scott Gramling. I want to thank producer AJ for working late and helping us out today. JK, I want to thank you as well. We will be back next week. Just a reminder that folks should do us a favor and go ahead and subscribe to the DRF Sports Forum podcast. We're in the main DRF feed and we're up by ourselves. We would appreciate the support very much. We'll be back next week. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatal, and if you're betting this weekend, may all the bounces go your way.